my beautiful wife, Carla Bitcoin. She kept her maiden name. She didn't change it to America, but we'll let that slide. But we had been making content just basically for free as a way of helping us actually to better understand Bitcoin. And also because we realized the Bitcoin space was taking everything so seriously. We'd been lurking on X, we'd been, at that point, Twitter. We've been lurking for some time, just following. And this was as Bitcoin started crashing down off of those initial 2021 all-time highs. And we saw this happening summer of 2021. And we said, man, people need to lighten up. Like, everybody's kind of down the dumps. What if we just started making videos? What if we just made a video about types of Bitcoin haters? Because we see all of them. As soon as Bitcoin starts crashing, all of the haters come out of the woodwork like cockroaches, right? They're very quiet when Bitcoin is pumping, or that's when they're calling it, we need to do something about this Bitcoin Ponzi scam. It's going to implode. And then they get to have their moment of, see, we told you so. We told you it was a scam, and we're very glad we didn't buy any. And then it ends up pumping again. That's just what Bitcoin does. But at that time, we just started making these videos. They started going really viral. We started on TikTok, actually. We don't really post there anymore because TikTok started basically pulling down our videos and shadow banning us because apparently we said some words that at that time the censors didn't like. So then we started posting more on X. Once it became X, we started posting on Noster when that was really kicking off. And we realized that there was a hugely underserved market of people who wanted to learn about Bitcoin, but have some fun along the way. And then when my wife got pregnant with our incredible little son, now he's getting close to a couple of years old, I basically said, okay, Carla doesn't want to do the video production anymore. This was what she was the mastermind behind all of that. I'm just the beautiful face. And so I said, well, what can I do? I guess, I'll just do what every guy of a certain age does, and I'll just start a podcast. And obviously it's going to be a Bitcoin podcast. Maybe I'll make it satirical. Maybe I'll make a Bitcoin podcast about Bitcoin podcasting, very meta. And then I said, well, what if I actually just did this for real? What if I just made an actual Bitcoin podcast? The world needs more of them, right? And so I did. And so at that point, I think it was the appropriate time in my kind of Bitcoin journey to do it. Because, I don't fully understand Bitcoin. I don't think anyone does. But I'm learning more every day. But at that point, at least, I wasn't quite the wide-eyed newcomer that I had once been. I had gotten a little bit more under my belt. So it was the right time to do it. And I always encourage everyone, if you're listening to this, thinking of starting a Bitcoin podcast, do it. Until we have more Bitcoin podcasts than TradFi podcasts, we do not have enough Bitcoin podcasts, and I will die on that hill.
I like it. I like that. Sounds good. Start your Bitcoin podcast today. This is Walker America approved.
Yeah,
exactly. Now, when you look back, what I love to hear about Walker is people that are very ingratiated into this space now. I love kind of listening to about what their concerns were about Bitcoin back in those early days, so their misconceptions when they were first getting integrated into the space. So for you, what was maybe your biggest misconception or the thing that you laugh at now because you realize you had it completely wrong about Bitcoin before you got in or when you were just starting to become a part of the orange pill world?
The most embarrassing one, certainly looking back, is the second time I ignored Bitcoin. So when I ignored it in 2017, because I thought, well, I don't have a big pile of cash sitting around to buy a whole Bitcoin, so I can't afford that. Not realizing, because I had literally done zero research, not realizing I could just buy a fraction of a Bitcoin called a Satoshi. I could just buy a couple bucks worth at once. But I didn't know that because I literally just looked at it. It took 30 seconds and said, can't do that. Let me just buy the top in Litecoin and lose a bunch of money on that in the years to come. Thankfully, I only bought a couple of them, right? Again, didn't have a big pile of cash sitting around. So that's one that it's embarrassing, but I think it's important for me to say, right? Because a lot of people still have that misconception today. Now, there's a lot better educational resources out there now. I think that's one thing. There's 24/7 Bitcoin news streaming on Roxom, right? That's amazing. That certainly didn't exist at the time. So that was one. I think another one that is very common for folks, if as you're going down that Bitcoin rabbit hole and thinking, wow, this seems so amazing, this seems so good to be true, governments are never going to let this happen. Governments are going to want to stop this, right? They must. But then you kind of go through that and you work through the game theory of okay, what would that actually mean? Okay, well, really feasibly to stop it, they would have to shut off the internet everywhere in the world all at once. Oh, and then even if they do that, well, you can broadcast Bitcoin transactions via HF radio frequencies. Okay, wow, that's kind of incredible. You realize that as you go deeper and deeper, all of these things that you think are potentially going to be the nail in Bitcoin's coffin, the reason that maybe you shouldn't buy into this thing because it'll just stop at some point. You realize all these things have already, one, been thought about and debated and discussed ad nauseum amongst Bitcoiners who came before you. Like you can probably find a post on Bitcoin, Bitcoin Talk about this from way back in the day. That's just the reality of it. Somebody's already thought of this. But when people are very new coming in, as I was, you think, well, I must be the first person who's thought of this. This must be a threat to Bitcoin. And it's like, no, that just means you haven't actually either read enough of what other people have written or spoken about, or you haven't thought about it deeply enough. But that's also okay, because we all start from a point of zero knowledge about Bitcoin at some point, right? The only person who was didn't have somebody come before them in Bitcoin was Satoshi, and even Satoshi was standing on the shoulders of the cryptographers who came before him. So I think it's important for us, as especially voices in the Bitcoin space, to remember that everyone starts from where we were. Everyone starts from that point of zero, and it's about how do we get as many people as possible, get them off zero, both from a knowledge standpoint, but also from a holding sats standpoint.
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. And we've seen it time and time again, right? Especially with some of the biggest names in the industry. Michael Saylor always comes to mind, was not initially a Bitcoin supporter. Then he did his necessary research in that period that we all go through. And now he is, our Lord and Sailor, Michael Saylor. So people, come a long way after doing their research about it. And that brought you now to your podcast. Now, you mentioned that you said there are already thousands of Bitcoin podcasts out there. Most of them already have Bitcoin in the title. What gap is your podcast are you trying to fill when you launch yours? Is it the satirical element? It seems like there's a little bit more fun for your podcast than a lot of others out there. What do you think has been the big differentiator for you?
Well, first of all, maybe just a quick correction. Definitely there are not thousands of Bitcoin podcasts out there. I'd say there's probably... There's a few dozen that are maybe like the big ones, I'd say. There's probably over 100, maybe a couple hundred. But like that is nothing compared to the grand scheme of like there's more golf podcasts than there are Bitcoin podcasts. Like that, like there are more podcasts about, various mundane niches. Not that golf, nothing wrong with golf. I like to golf myself. But like that's kind of crazy. There's more podcasts about golf than there are about literally the future of money as we know it. So I think there's still a massive addressable market there. That said, I think that perhaps the part of the niche that I filled, well, it helped that Peter McCormack was transitioning his podcast to the Peter McCormack Show. At that point, it was called Mr. Obnoxious when he first switched it from what Bitcoin did. So there was a little bit of a gap in the marketplace there. Danny now is carrying that torch very well, brought What Bitcoin Did back. I'm extremely glad about that because he does a great job running that show. But I think part of what the gap that I filled is, as you said, being I don't take myself too seriously. I'll put it that way. Like I'm under no delusions that I'm the most technical person out there, or that I'm the most economically literate person out there. I try to be a bit of a jack of all trades, but perhaps a master of none in that case. And I think that what people really ultimately want, especially in this age of AI, where you can literally have an AI avatar that you have speaking to people for, you can create a completely AI generated podcast. I can clone myself if I want to very easily and turn myself into a podcaster. So I never have to sit behind the camera again. But I don't want to do that. And I don't think people want that, because what people ultimately crave is an actual human connection. They want to actually know that there's a person behind something. If they want to just get AI generated news, they'll just go and do that. Like they don't need to listen to an AI talking head. And so I think that there was an opportunity for me, but also an opportunity for more people to come into this space and provide an authentic experience for people who want to listen. And you don't have to have a podcast that absolutely becomes the biggest one in the space to be successful. Because I think an important thing is that every type of podcast resonates with a different group of people, right? And if you can find the group that you're going to resonate with, you may appeal and get somebody to start studying Bitcoin that I could never appeal to, just because they think my face is really annoying, or they think that my voice sounds too much like Batman, or whatever it might be. All comments that I've gotten on my YouTube channel, by the way, thank you to the nice people out there who like to remind me that I'm using a voice changer, which I'm not, guys. I don't know how to do that. I'm not technically literate enough. Moral of the story, I think, for me, it was about filling a little bit of a gap of, hey, I'm not going to take myself too seriously. Bitcoin is a very serious topic. We're talking about the separation of money and state. Again, we're talking about the getting rid of the ability of the state to have control of the money printer. They can still have their money printers, but they can't print with Bitcoin. So that's a serious topic. that doesn't mean we can't have some fun along the way, does it? I mean, I certainly don't think so.
Yeah, no, I couldn't agree more. And I'm glad to hear somebody out there is finally trying to save the city of Gotham from financial collapse through precious Bitcoin. I love the idea that people think you're just doing it in a Batman voice. That's incredible. And
Amazing.
Your show is really fun because it blends a lot, right? You got interviews, which we've seen a lot. We have Austrian economics readings, Bitcoin news roundups. Like, was that structure, was that intentional from the start, or was it more of just kind of throw everything at the wall and see what sticks and go from there? Like, what was the plan initially?
To be honest, the plan was create a podcast that I would listen to that I felt was missing in this space, which was something that did everything. Like, I loved Peter McCormack's show. That was What Bitcoin Did was the kind of first Bitcoin podcast that started me off down the rabbit hole. I loved his interviews. He's a masterful interviewer as well, truly a master of his craft, and has continued to grow that show with his, less of a Bitcoin focus, more of the political focus. And, he's amazing at it. But I also wanted, I loved Guy Swan's show. I love Bitcoin Audible. I love being able to get those readings directly into my veins, to help get me my 40 hours per week of Bitcoin podcast, but also to get perhaps some technical knowledge or some economics knowledge in a written form, but have it read out loud to me. And then, the other side of it is, okay, but I also want to stay kind of up to date with what's happening in the news world, right? And so why don't I just do all of those things? And as a function of doing them, I am also ingesting them myself. Like, if I'm preparing a news roundup, or if I'm reading one of these Austrian economics pieces, or if I'm interviewing someone, like, the best part about it is I'm getting that podcast experience firsthand. I am the podcaster there. So for me, it was literally just about filling a gap that I felt was there, and really trying to make a show that I would want to listen to, that gave me everything I wanted in one place. That's really what it came down to. And I hope I've done an okay job with that. I've transitioned more to doing a lot of interviews, but I've tried to let things kind of bleed back in, and may have some more readings and things coming up soon.
Well, I got a feeling, based on what I can tell, you're doing pretty well, and I don't think the robots will be replacing you anytime soon. Because kind of to your point, right? Like, that's kind of the point of, I think, when you're watching somebody, is that trust, that unspoken trust, that I trust this person, I trust the information they're giving me. And if you and I start getting replaced by robots, I don't think that trust will still exist there in the same way, right? So it's really important to have these authentic voices in the space, like yourself and your better half, right? You guys are known as the crypto couple, and have built quite the reputation for short form videos that you kind of talked about. You started on the TikToks. I remember back in those COVID days, things were wild there. When you're making content that maybe is aimed at, quote unquote, like normies who don't live on Bitcoin Twitter, what's your approach for that like? Like, how do you go about taking this complex financial topic and then breaking it down for people that aren't already in this space yet, in terms that they can understand, and maybe even more so are additionally curious about after hearing what you have to say?
It's a great question, and it's a really hard question in terms of, how do you do that? And that's something that we played around with a lot of different formats of doing, because what you realize is it's very difficult to explain a complex topic simply. Why? Because you need to really understand the topic at a deep level in order to be able to break it down to, ELI 5, explain it like I'm 5. That requires a level of understanding that you can't bullshit your way through, unless you want to give people bad information, right? And so for us, it was really, it was part of our own learning curve about Bitcoin to figure out, how can we explain this topic really simply? And we tried a bunch of different formats for stuff, from, character role-playing videos, her being Bitcoin, me being fiat, to setting up, we did one, it was called Funny Money, we're both doing terrible British accents, speaking in a library. She's wearing a corset, trying to basically, let's see what actually gets people's attention. That show definitely did get people's attention, but explaining, how does inflation work? How does fractional reserve banking work? How do these complex topics go that they don't actually teach you the truth about in school or really anywhere? How do we explain those in a way that's going to resonate with people? And a lot of it for us just came back to, people pay attention when things are funny, when things are engaging. If you can make somebody laugh and have them be learning at the same time, that is an incredible thing. And that message will stick with them. They're more likely to share that as well. And that was our big thing, was how do we reach outside the echo chamber? One of the only ways you're going to do that is by making something that is outrageous and over the top and memorable and funny. Otherwise, it's just not going to make it outside the Bitcoin bubble. A technical explainer of Bitcoin's, supply cap of 21 million, that may be interesting for, for a certain subset of people, but that's just not going to have super wide appeal. It's just not. And that's okay. That's why I think you, as a content creator, as a podcaster, whatever, you need to be constantly thinking about how can you make your content widely accessible, but not just widely accessible, but it has to be have wide shareability potential. It needs to have that virality potential. How can you make sure that things are hitting hard, you're giving good information, but that people actually have a reason to go out there and share it, to share it with their friends, to share it with their family, to share it with more strangers on the internet, whatever it may be. You need to have something that sets it apart. And that is hard to do in an era where there is so short attention spans and there's just so much slop, AI and human generated out there. How do you stand out from that? Well, I think it does come back to being authentic, but it comes down to being authentic in a way that that makes you really memorable. So, be who you are. And for us, that was be a little bit over the top and be kind of sarcastic and satirical. And I think that worked pretty well. We've been on a bit of a hiatus, but there are rumblings and rumors that Carla is working on another Bitcoin Christmas song for this year. So we'll see. I don't want to put her on the spot. She usually does one a year, even when she was pregnant. That was the one video she did. She was like, I've got to get a Bitcoin Christmas song out there. So we'll see. Turns out music is a great way to get complex topics stuck in people's heads. You can sing about money and people listen. At least when you sound like she does, not when you sound like me.
Fair enough. And to your point, that makes a lot of sense, right? Because it's like, in order to get that mass appeal, sure, you need to talk about the thing you need to talk about, but then beyond that, what can resonate with these larger audiences that might not necessarily care about that said topic, but care about the way you're presenting it? What kind of comes to mind is, based on something you said, was like if you and Carla did your own version. You remember when those Apple PC commercials used to come out with Justin Long? Like, I'm Apple, I'm PC. And they did a really great job of taking this information, but figuring out a way that it's more accessible and to everybody, and everybody can get behind the humor part of it. And whether it's humor or song, those are avenues outside of this financial realm where people can connect with one another as long as the content itself is good. And it seems like you and Carla have done a really great job of that, because now your podcast has had a lot of big guests. Samson Mow and a lot of other Bitcoin heavyweights, just to name one. Of the guests you've had so far, has there been anybody that's completely surprised you or just blew your mind or made you think, wow, this whole interview was not what I thought it was going to be? Are there any memorable guests that you can think of that maybe made you think that way?
Well, from the Bitcoiner side, obviously there's people like Jeff Booth and Preston Pish and Lynn Alden have been gracious enough to share their time with me multiple times. I always love speaking with American Huddle and Eric Kaysen as well, but these are names that are well known around the Bitcoin space, right? Samson as well has shared his time with me very generously multiple times. These folks are all very well known. I'd say in terms of somebody that I think was really surprising for me, but also perhaps would be surprising for listeners, is somebody I had on very early in the show, actually, a sci-fi author named Devin Erickson. He wrote a book called Theft of Fire, which really reignited my passion for reading science fiction. And I'd seen him, I bought his book because I saw him basically just eviscerate some moron online who was preaching socialism. And I was like, okay, I like the way this guy writes. Go to his profile, hit follow. Hold on, this guy's got a science fiction book? Okay. You order it, read it. Wow, I really like this. I need to get this guy on the podcast. He was one of my very, very early guests. So I didn't quite have this set up even back then. But that was really amazing because I probably would not have initially thought, okay, this guy is going to just, first of all, blow my mind in this interview with how based he is, but just also how deeply he has thought about so many different topics as they relate to Bitcoin, how he incorporated Bitcoin into his book too, in a very kind of natural way. Yeah, that's the one. And I highly recommend everybody check out his book. I enjoyed the heck out of it. I think he's got the sequel coming out pretty soon here. I'd love to have him back on the show again soon, because it's those kind of conversations, I think, that aren't directly about Bitcoin, but are tangential to Bitcoin. They're around Bitcoin, right? We're talking money and economics and politics and freedom, but also looking at that through a science fiction and cultural lens. And how much does culture actually impact technology, vice versa, politics, vice versa, and these feedback loops? And so that interview just gave me a ton to chew on that I kind of, I knew it would be good, but the depth at which we went into some of these topics was really just mind blowing. So hoping to have Devin back on the show again soon. And yeah, I'm not being paid to say this, but highly recommend his book, Theft of Fire. If you like science fiction, it's awesome. And there are little Bitcoin Easter eggs in there. So it's cool to see Bitcoin emerging into futuristic sci-fi novels.
Yeah, that sounds super cool. I wonder if Nolan Bowerly, who I'm sure you know, is into that, because that sounds like something that would be up his alley. He's got such incredible knowledge of seemingly everything, and especially I know he writes books and sci-fi and stuff too, so that's super cool. I'll have to check that out myself. And yeah, it's always fun to see whether it's maybe a littler known guest that provides you with these really interesting pearls of wisdom, or like sometimes you'll get a bigger guest. I remember we had Scaramucci on here a couple months ago, and the first like 10 minutes, he talked about why it was important to have big balls and how he tells his kids if they're walking down the beach, if there's not a line in the sand from their big balls dragging, they're doing something wrong. And he was relating that to Bitcoin, and I was like, this is really going off the rails, but he's a mooch, so you let him do it, and it was a lot of fun.
Amazing.
Now, Walker, when you're talking to someone who's brand new to Bitcoin and they find out about your show, where do you tell them that they should start with their own education? Do you think the interviews, the news recaps, the Austrian economics bedtime stories? Like, if someone's getting into it in their space and they're getting into your content, where's the best place for them to start?
It's a great question. I think that's one of the difficulties with a lot of podcasts is, okay, I'm just new here, but this podcast got a couple hundred episodes. What do I do? So I worked on a series, which I'll be publishing. It's a 6-part limited series. I'll be publishing the last episode of it shortly here, probably in this next week or two. Last episode will be with BTC Sessions, but it's essentially a series called Saving in Bitcoin. And that series is meant to be a evergreen limited series that people can refer their friends to. It starts off with Jeff Booth, and then Lynn Alden, and then Pierre and Morgan Richard. And then we have, Joe, oh my gosh, I'm blanking right now on his last name and I feel so bad. Joe, he did the incredible What's the Problem video. And I'm clearly just have not had enough coffee today. Joe Bryan, sorry. And then I've also got Will Reeves, CEO of Fold, and Guy Swan on one of the other episodes. And then BTC Sessions will be the last one. So I think that's probably a great place. These episodes are all a little under an hour, so they're a little more digestible. And we just kind of walk through what is Bitcoin, what is money, what is the problem. And I think that that's a good place for people to start if they're starting from absolutely zero. Now, if you want to go a little bit more hardcore, just pick any of my conversations with American Hodl and Eric Kaysen. But just be warned, they may be more than you're ready for yet at this stage.
Yeah, it's like you almost need like a beginner's set of videos, and then when you graduate, you're ready for the next one. You can unlock them or something. No, that makes sense. A little something for everybody. And to your point earlier, there are a lot, but technically still not a lot of Bitcoin podcasts and influencers that are starting to make their way into the space. And as someone who's already produced a lot of episodes of the Bitcoin podcast, how do you go about keeping it fresh and new all the time instead of just blending into all the noise out there? That seems like quite the challenge. How do you do that?
No, I think it's a great question. I think it starts with the fact that our world is luckily evolving at such a breakneck pace, and there's always something in fiat clown world to keep us talking about. But I think it also comes down to just perhaps how I'm evolving personally. Like this podcast is something, I started because I wanted to. The goal wasn't for me to make money on it or anything like that. If that comes as a byproduct, fine. But the goal is just for me to be able to talk to Bitcoiners, to learn more about Bitcoin, to talk to people who are kind of in and around Bitcoin, maybe not just exclusively focused on Bitcoin. I don't mean that they're focused on crypto. I just mean that they're focused on other things besides just Bitcoin, whether that be parenting, which is a topic I've become increasingly interested in, whether that be science fiction, whether that be any of these things that are kind of loosely related to Bitcoin or that come about as important things to think about as you go deeper down that Bitcoin rabbit hole, but also as your life evolves. So I think the way that you keep these things interesting is just by evolving with your show, evolving with your content. And that is naturally going to bring you to new places. that is naturally going to invite new kinds of discussions. It's naturally going to invite new conclusions for you individually, as well as, for your guests. And so, yeah, I think the best way to make sure you keep things fresh is to make sure that you yourself do not get stale. Keep challenging yourself, keep thinking about things through different lenses, check your biases, go back to first principles and reevaluate again, and see where you might have the room for growth, where you might have the opportunity to look at something differently, and where that maybe is able to take kind of you and your guests in a different direction or a different journey than it may otherwise have done.
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. And you're not just in the podcast world exclusively, though. You do a lot of other things, including you're the SVP over at Vibe Capital Management, which I would love to talk a little bit about. Like, how does that professional finance work shape the way you approach your media work, especially with your podcast today? Do you give more of a slant to the financial side, like the financial news, maybe more than you might have previously? Or how do those two things kind of intersect?
So Vibes Capital Management has been a pretty incredible firm to work with. I am the SVP there, the senior Vibes podcaster, and it's a pretty incredible group of people. Right now this is basically a large group chat of people sharing our vibes with each other. So while some may say that it is not a really strict venture firm, we would just say that we are a vibes-based investment firm, and because ultimately vibes are what kind of are the best indicators in a market full of noise. I think vibes are the signal. So I think that I've always tried to make sure that vibes are a core part of my podcasting experience that I'm giving my viewers. But now I really take it a bit more seriously, because as a senior vibes podcaster, you really do have to make sure that you are bringing the best vibes at any given time, but also capable of receiving the best vibes. And sometimes there are bad vibes. Those bad vibes need to be paid attention to as well, those counter signal vibes. I hope that answers the question.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, it does. And as someone who is very attuned to the vibes, we're very excited here at Roxom because you recently joined up RoxomTV as a host of a new show. So my first question is, what were the vibes like that made you decide to bring your voice to RoxomTV, and why do it now? What was that process like for you? And tell us a little bit about the show and what you'll be doing here. We're pumped.
I'm stoked to be on board. Honestly, the vibes from McShane and Nolan were just really good. And I thought, well, if these guys are going to be working on building something over here and they want me involved, well, then heck, let's get on board. So stoked to be jumping on here and going to be broadcasting for my first episode tomorrow at 1 p.m. Eastern. I'm on good old Central Time, so I have to do a little mental math every time. It's very difficult. But the show right now. Yeah. Working title is Breaking Bit. We'll see if we stick with that. We're still workshopping things around a little bit, but it's going to be a 3-hour kind of marathon of a show. So we'll be bringing in, of course, talking about news as it happens. There's a lot of things that can happen in the Bitcoin world just as live in the space of 3 hours, but then also bringing in some plenty of guests, rotating people through, keeping it dynamic, and really trying to have this, this marathon podcast session, this marathon show every week that people can tune back into. That'll be a part recap of what happened in the past couple of days, the past week, part analysis of what's happening right now, part looking into the future, and then part just digging deep as time allows into various guest stories, and really just trying to help people have yet another great piece of content, great piece of programming that they can use to help make sense of what's happening in the Bitcoin world and the larger world around them. This show will have a Bitcoin focus, of course, but it's also going to incorporate a lot of other political and economic news that is related to Bitcoin, but perhaps may not always be readily apparent why it is relevant. So really excited for it. I think it's going to be a lot of fun. If anyone has name suggestions, if they don't like Breaking Bit, let me know. I'm still open to changing it, but we're going to workshop that one around and see if it sticks.
I think that's a pretty good name. I think anybody hears that, they know exactly what you're going for there, which is usually a signal of a good name. What do you feel like is going to be the different lane you're taking with Breaking Bit as opposed to the Bitcoin podcast? Are you kind of looking at more, it sounds like, of a world view that's not so strictly just Bitcoin, but maybe how parts of the world tie into Bitcoin? Or what's the idea there for kind of differentiating it from what you're already doing currently?
Yeah, I think it's going to be more of a broad focus, but also in a 3-hour time slot, there's a lot more opportunity to really go deep. So we can have a broad lens, but we can take really deep dives in the space of 3 hours. And at the same time, have room to cycle through multiple different guests, have multiple different panels. It's going to be, it'll be a marathon session for me. But the nice thing is that I want to make it so that anybody who's tuning in, no matter where you tune in the episode, you're going to have something that's really valuable there. So being able to take these deep dives on various topics in and around Bitcoin, again, what's strictly Bitcoin, and then what is also kind of the broader implications of the political, the economic, et cetera. And keep it as a very just dynamic show that has the opportunity to go deeper given the timing of the show. I think, I don't know if there's any other really like 3 hour deep dive type shows going on right now. So we're going to be trying something new here, see what happens, but I think it's going to be a lot of fun.
Yeah, it sounds super fun. Are you going to be expected to do the 3 full hours by yourself? Or are you going to have friends popping in to join you to talk shop about what's going on? Or what's the format feeling like as you kind of build this out? And again, the first one's tomorrow, so I don't expect all the answers right now.
Yeah, no, we'll definitely not be just me for all 3 hours. I want to keep this dynamic and keep it moving. So bring in multiple people at a time. Maybe we'll do, sometimes where it's just a one-on-one. We take a really deep dive with a particular guest about a topic of interest. But even so, we can go for a couple of hours and still have an hour left to cover other topics. So I think it'll be a unique show in that, yes, there will be a lot of guests coming through. But all throughout that, we have the opportunity to really kind of do a live look at what is happening in the Bitcoin world at any given time, which is nice. You've got 3 hours. You can have multiple hours of interview and still have that interspersed with a lot of stuff that's, breaking news as it happens. Or maybe not. It's not breaking news, but it's related to these other topics that we may be taking deeper dives with in terms of the guests that come on. So, yeah, if you're listening out there and you want to be a guest on the show, hit me up. We'll see what we can do.
And now, Walker, what's interesting to me is you've already started building your own empire here within the Bitcoin space. But you decided to team up with us here at RoxomTV, which again, we're thrilled about. But why now? Why did now feel like the time? Was it just Nolan and Mick Shane's vibes were that good and you had to see for yourself? Or do you feel like we're at an interesting inflection point right now and maybe Roxom helps you ride that wave to the next era of Bitcoin? Or I don't know, what was the reasoning for joining up at this point in time?
Well, McShane and Nolan definitely had very good vibes, so I don't want to discount that.
Okay.
But the other piece of it, I think you are spot on with that. Where we're at a really interesting time right now. I think where people have been feeling kind of this sideways, bull crab market action, this chop solidation, as Checkmate would say. This time has been kind of almost boring for people, but we can all feel that there's something that is there's something building, right? There's some sort of undercurrent that is happening. There is some sort of a vibe shift that is underway right now. And whatever happens next, it feels like it's going to be one of those kind of suddenly moments. And so I think that what better way to help capture that and to help people make sense of it than by teaming up with Roxom. And so I'm honestly, I'm also very excited to have other people doing the production for me for once. I'm a one-man band over here on the Bitcoin podcast side of things. So that's going to be really nice. And it gives me more of an opportunity to focus on the actual content. Now, that being said, I'm still going to keep my normal show running, of course. People can continue to expect the Bitcoin podcast to keep on going. That's not stopping anytime soon. But I think this is a great opportunity to, I think the idea of 24/7 Bitcoin and Bitcoin adjacent news that Roxom is doing is fantastic, and happy to be a part of it. And hopefully it'll be a meaningful contribution and people will like the show.
Oh, I'm sure they will. I know everybody here is just teeming with excitement that you're joining the old Roxom fam. And as we move into the end of Q4 here, this has been a very interesting year for Bitcoin. I think we can all agree on that. It's very different than any other cycles we've seen previously. What are you excited to cover specifically as we enter this new era of Bitcoin? Is it, we have all these Bitcoin treasury strategies, obviously, are the big narrative right now. Government regulation and guardrails. What are you really looking forward toward as we enter Q4 of talking about on your show as we see the Bitcoin ecosystem change dramatically right before our eyes?
Yeah, I mean, all of the above. But I'm also really excited to pursue kind of the freedom tech angle of things as well. There are so many things that right now, Bitcoin treasury companies have obviously been getting so much attention for obvious reasons, right? This is a fascinating time in the development of Bitcoin's overall market and just kind of how this Overton window has really just dramatically shifted. That being said, I think it's so important for us to also talk about all the incredible tools that are being developed, all the incredible protocols that are being built out and built on top of, like eCash with Cashew, like Nostr, all these other things kind of related to and around Bitcoin that are going to be really important tools and basically, freedom technologies for people to use and take advantage of in the years to come. I want to make sure that people are aware of these. And so a huge part of this show is really going to be taking that angle of how do we help everybody move in a positive direction along that sovereignty spectrum, right? How do you help people increase their own personal sovereignty as much as possible? Bitcoin is one piece of that, and a huge piece of that, really a centerpiece of that. But there is so many other tools, other technologies, other things that people should be aware of that are going to help them move even further along that spectrum. And so that's one of the things I'm really excited to talk about. Yeah, we're going to cover news when it comes to, Bitcoin treasury companies and anything else, happening, whatever the Fed's cabal of bankers is getting up to on any given, week, however much they're deciding to change the price of money. We'll be covering all that. We'll be covering the political side of things too, but a huge undercurrent in this show is going to be the freedom tech angle of things. How people, what should people be aware of? How they can take advantage of these different tools and why they matter in the broader context, why Bitcoin matters as well in the broader context. Because again, what I was saying at the beginning, it's like the NGU is really important. The number go up is so important to drive adoption because let's be honest, price FOMO is one of the things that brings everyone in, right? But when that goes away, because Bitcoin does eventually take some dips, it does happen. And when that happens, you need to make sure that you really remember why we are here, why Bitcoin is so important. And that is to be able to make the freedom go up, make the FGU, right? And so that's one of the things I'm really excited to talk about a lot on this show. And again, because we have such a long 3-hour session to do that each week, I think we're going to be able to have some really interesting conversations, both on the technical, the political, the economic. It's going to be really fun to see how we can weave it all together to create what I hope will be an extremely high value show for listeners and watchers.
Oh, I mean, if your past content is any indication, I'm sure it will be that. But with that being said, we're still like this really unique point in Bitcoin's history now, right? Like you said, we're still early. I think we're like 300 million Bitcoiners strong over the course of, 8 billion people in the world. So it's like 1/24th, math, I think, of the population, right?
Yeah.
And as you and I, who are ingratiated in the space already, we're seeing what's happening. The writing is on the wall, but there's still plenty of people out there that are just not buying it yet. They're not in it yet. They think it's internet funny money, it's monopoly money, they're gold bugs, their name is Peter Schiff, whatever you want. When you're meeting these people who are at a place that you and I were ourselves many years ago, what do you tell them in terms of like why they need to be paying attention to Bitcoin right now? Like what is the line there that you're giving people when they're saying, oh, I don't care about this. Why should I care about it? What are you telling them as someone who's been in this space, who's gone through this process themselves, to get them at least curious about looking into Bitcoin for themselves? What are you telling them right now?
I'd tell them that when you don't have Bitcoin, your life gets more expensive and harder year after year. That doesn't mean you're not going to be successful, but it will get more expensive for you in dollar terms, and it will get harder for you to keep up with the pace of inflation. You see this every time you go to the grocery store or fill up your gas tank. When you have Bitcoin, your life gets easier and everything gets cheaper year after year. And what I think is really important, because I think a huge part of why a lot of people continue to ignore Bitcoin at any given time is because they did hear about it at some point, whether it was a month, a year, 5 years, 6 years before. They heard about it a long time ago, perhaps, and they say now, and they think about the price when they heard about it, and they see the price now, it's over $100,000, whatever it is today, $112,000. We crashed, quote, to $112,000. What a time to be alive when that's viewed as a crash, right? And a buying opportunity.
Yeah.
But what I really try to emphasize to people, and something I'm going to continue to beat the drum about as a part of this new show, is that you are still early. We are still just barely in the first inning of this thing. Not even, we're still warming up. We're still just trotting around the bases, hitting a few ground balls to continue the baseball analogy. Like we're just getting warmed up. And one of the charts that I love to show people, one of the things that I love to go over with them is just Jesse Myers, Croesus BTC's chart, basically showing total global asset value. And it's sailors used it. This is a famous chart. And I think it's such a perfect way to explain the earliness of where we are. because you see how small Bitcoin is. Like if Bitcoin feels big, Bitcoin feels expensive, right? Especially if you're looking at buying your first few Satoshis. When you look at this and see Bitcoin's a $2 trillion asset, a little over 2 trillion. Wow, that sounds like a lot, right? 2 trillion. But then you look at total global asset value, and that's $1,000 trillion. In gold, we've got a 10x. Gold's at 22 trillion. We've got a 10x to hit gold. And when we do that, we're at over $1 million a coin. And I think we all know that gold is inferior money to Bitcoin. It's still pretty good. Peter Schiff, I'm happy that gold's been pumping for him lately. He really needed a win here, so I'm rooting for you, Peter. But we are so tiny. Our art and collectibles is 27 trillion. Real estate's 370 trillion, et cetera, et cetera. Bitcoin's 2 trillion out of 1,000 trillion. We're at 0.2%. If that's not early, I don't know what is. So try to keep reminding people, hey, you are early to this, but it might make sense to get some sooner rather than later. Just start stacking. Get off of zero. That is, I think, the most important thing. The only incorrect amount of Bitcoin exposure is 0% exposure. So as long as you're off of zero, you're on the right track.
Yeah. No, I think that's totally fair. And, aside from the fact that we're at this inflection point, both from like regulatory standpoints and institutions are obviously getting in the mix, we're at this really unique psychological inflection point too with Bitcoin, where people now think it's too expensive and they're priced out, right? And that kind of lends itself back to the idea of unit bias when it's like you can just buy a little bit and that's what you should be doing. But it reminded me, because you brought up earlier about how you got into Litecoin early on, and I've got a friend who I use as a cautionary tale for this. A couple of months ago I was with him, and he was telling me back during the COVID days, for Christmas one year, he was like, I wanted to buy all of my family some Bitcoin, but it wasn't a substantial amount. So I bought them all 5 Litecoins. And now they all have 5 Litecoins that they're just not doing anything with, when that Bitcoin today would have been worth tens of thousands of dollars for each one of them. So I guess that brings you back to my question is, what do we need to do to get people off of this idea that they're priced out or they're too late or it's too expensive? Unit bias is very real, but how do we overcome that challenge? Because I think whoever figures out how to do that the best is going to win a certain part of this market, at least in terms if that's a media version or something. How do we communicate to people that it is still early, and while the number is big, it's very much not too late to buy? What are your thoughts on that? Or is that an ongoing thing we're all trying to figure out, I guess?
No, I think that's the $21 million or 21 million Bitcoin question, right? That's the hardest part, because even if I throw out the numbers I just did from Jesse Meyer's chart, I can say that 1,000 trillion of global assets and only $2 trillion of Bitcoin, 0.2%. A lot of people still say, okay, yeah, sure, neat, but still feels like I don't know, it just doesn't feel right, or I don't think it's going to have the price appreciation that's one of these other shit coins is going to have, or whatever. Or what, that still seems too risky for me, and I'm just going to put my money into the S&P 500 and take my 7-8% a year, which doesn't even keep up with the rate of monetary inflation. But okay, how many different rabbit holes do you want to go down? So I think the honest answer to this is that there is no silver bullet for this. There is no way to just suddenly have the formula where everybody gets. I don't even think denominating Bitcoin in sats or changing only sats exist technically, but we have this 100 million sats as a Bitcoin, and that's what people think of, right? I don't even think necessarily unit bias helps, or would let's say fixing the unit bias problem helps that much. It helps some. It certainly will help some. But I think a lot of it is just a lot of people, especially in the Western world, the so-called developed world, simply have not felt enough pain yet where they're looking for a real solution. And that's sad, but there's a reason that you see incredibly high usage of Bitcoin or stable coins in a lot of developing countries where they have a way, you think our fiat's bad. You should see some of these other fiats. They are really bad. But there's a reason you see increases in Bitcoin and, again, stablecoin usage in some of these other jurisdictions, because to them, the US dollar is, that is stable. Even though the dollar is losing purchasing power compared to their, shitcoin of a fiat, it's barely, it's staying stable. And so I think as sad as it may sound, I don't know if there is a silver bullet that all of a sudden makes it click for vast swaths of people and makes them pay attention and say, now I get it. Now I know I need to get Bitcoin. I think that for each person, we talk about this idea of the orange pill. You can give someone an orange pill though, but they have to take it themselves. Like it's not, you can try to give them the orange suppository, but it's not going to work. They have to be willing to take it. They have to be willing to do the work to go down the rabbit hole themselves. And again, maybe there are some things that we can do to move the needle a little bit for more and more people. And one of those things I think is honestly more and more and more high quality Bitcoin content and Bitcoin only content. Again, because so much stuff in the crypto space just muddies the waters, right? People get distracted, like, your friend who probably, is kicking himself, me who's kicking myself for buying, a couple of Litecoins back that I still don't even, I don't know what the price of Litecoin is now, but I still don't even think they're as expensive as when I bought them after all those years, which is just, kills me. But it is what it is, right? You get smart by force, not by choice for most people. And I think that's going to be the case when it comes to Bitcoin adoption, sadly. Now, that being said, I think that honestly, this shift in the Overton window from the political perspective that we've had, like I had friends who didn't matter how many times I told them to buy Bitcoin for years. They wouldn't do it. They'd say they'd look at it. They never did. It didn't matter how many podcasts I sent them. Didn't matter anything. Trump starts talking favorably about Bitcoin, and they were like, "Oh, I just bought Bitcoin." I'm like, "That's all it took." That's all,
Yeah.
So no amount of Bitcoin podcasts or anything else was gonna get them over the line, but their favorite politician talking about Bitcoin did. So again, it's like, what do we need to do? I guess just keep blowing open the Overton window, making it so that as many people as possible just get exposed to these ideas, that these ideas get more normalized. And I think that is something that maybe does move the needle, the normalization of Bitcoin in terms of, this is not some scary fringe thing anymore. This isn't just magic internet money for internet nerds. This is it's a very real thing. It's something that companies are putting on their balance sheets, something that nation states are putting in their treasuries. Like, this is something I want to have because, gosh, it seems like everybody's getting a piece of it, right? I want a piece of that too. So I think, a lot of these things, like, we are just still early and it does just still take time. I wish I had the silver bullet for it. I really wish I did, because you're right. If somebody does figure out the silver bullet, like, that's going to be very good for them.
Yeah, they'll win the day. It's one of those things where it's like, it's kind of almost a carrot and a stick thing, where I feel like people only start paying attention when bad things are happening in their own backyard and they're desperate for some kind of answer, which you see in South America with their terrible inflation rates. And if we experience something similar here, people will be looking around for alternatives, but because we are the world reserve currency still, it's not as imperative to do so. So it's like almost like the United States needs to fall into complete economic chaos, and then everybody's going to start really paying attention to Bitcoin. But as Michael Saylor says, we all buy Bitcoin at the price that we deserve. Yeah, let's hope not. Exactly.
Yeah,
I will say though.
Go ahead.
I was going to say, total side note, you gave me a brand new website we're going to talk about later. It's OnlyFans, but denominated in Bitcoin, only sats. We'll talk about it later. I think it's got big opportunity. You only get tipped in sats, so just a thought here.
I love it. No, I was just gonna say that, and you build it on Nostr too. It's even better. So you can't be censored from it. Wow, censorship resistant OnlyFans. Perfect.
All right, Walker, we're coming to a close here, but before we do, I want to turn to camera 3 really quick on my side, because we got a fun little game we're going to play here. So with all of the guests on our show, we play a Price is Right kind of style game. And here's the game. As we talked about earlier, 2025 has been a wild year for Bitcoin, and everybody wants to know, where's the price going to go? So you'll see here on screen, we have our list of some of our top price predictions from past guests we've had. And what we would love for you to do is give us your non-financial advice, all for shits and giggles price prediction for where you think Bitcoin will be at the end of this year, and whoever gets closest, I'm going to send a Roxom Patagonia to. So you might be doubling up on those if you end up winning. So you can see what we got here. We have Knut Svanholm. He's in the lead with a $443,000 prediction by the end of this year. I apparently am a much more conservative 142. Where do you think Bitcoin's going to fall December 31st of 2025 when that clock strikes midnight? What do you think?
$221,696 on the dot.
$221,696. 696, that's right?
You got it. You got it.
Okay. Well, we got it. Perfect. Put them on the board.
We'll see.
All right. So we've talked about a lot today, Walker. We're super pumped to have you and your new show on air. I think I might be popping by for your inaugural episode tomorrow for a bit, so we're pumped about that. In the meantime, though, I'm sure there's plenty of people in our audience that are like, I like the cut of this Walker guy's jib. I need to start researching and looking into his stuff myself. With that being said, what's the best place I can send them to get everything Walker in America until they see you on RoxomTV?
Yeah, well, thanks so much for having me, man. This was a blast. Stoked to be working with you guys, and excited to have you on the show tomorrow for the inaugural episode. You can go to bitcoinpodcast.net for like all the links. If you want to find me, the podcast, just search for The Bitcoin Podcast. You should be able to find that pretty easily. Search at Walker America on X, YouTube, Rumble, whatever. You can go to primal.net/Walker or /Titcoin to find me on Noster. And otherwise just head on over to bitcoinpodcast.net. You should be able to find all the links there. And go out there and start your own Bitcoin podcast as well. That's the last thing I'd like to leave folks with. We need more Bitcoin podcasts, and you too can make a difference.
Love it. Well, Walker, thank you so much for your time today. It was an absolute pleasure to have you, and welcome to the RoxomTV fam. We're certainly excited to have a new brother, father, and whatever other, uncle, however you want to say out there. But we're super pumped to have you, and we thank you so much for your time today. It was a blast having you on the Blockchain Report.
Thanks for having me, man. Look forward to having you on tomorrow.
Can't wait. All right, Walker, we'll see you soon, buddy. And we'll be taking a break here at the Blockchain Report. We'll be right back with more after this message, so stay tuned.
Security matters. Zappo Bank. The only way to bank your Bitcoin. Apply now at zappobank.com.
So, tell us about your furry friend here. What's his name?
Oh, this? This is Bitcoin.
Bitcoin.
It's not just a cat, he's family.
Quite a name, and I must say, looks quite pampered.
Oh, absolutely. Bitcoin deserves nothing but the best. He's my little prince.
But with such a valuable pet, aren't you afraid of losing him?
Losing Bitcoin? No, it never happened before, so it's not something I worry about. Excuse me for a moment. Bitcoin, stay here, right?
Bitcoin, no! Bitcoin, come on, little buddy, Bitcoin, I need you, don't go!
Are you interested in effortlessly growing your Bitcoin portfolio? Of course you are. I sure am. The Bitcoin credit card by Gemini earns you Bitcoin back on every purchase. Use it like any credit card. You could buy lunch, gas, or your weekly groceries, and you'll earn up to 4% back instantly in Bitcoin or one of over 50 other cryptos straight to your account. And all with no annual fee, and right now, you can grab a $200 Bitcoin welcome bonus. It's the easiest way to start building your Bitcoin stack. Just go to gemini.com/Roxom to learn more. Terms apply. See the link in the description for more information regarding rates and fees.
It runs on Bitcoin. Introducing Roxom, the first ever exchange where Bitcoiners can trade treasury stocks entirely in BTC. Get exposure to top Bitcoin holding companies like MicroStrategy and Metaplanet, priced in Bitcoin from the start. No fiat, no middlemen. This is what financial freedom looks like. Early access now live at Roxom.com/treasuries. Built by Bitcoiners for Bitcoiners.
All right, well, that was a fun chat with Walker America. Make sure to check out his podcast if you haven't already, and his show, which will be debuting after the Blockchain Report tomorrow for their inaugural episode. So, Breaking Bit, make sure to check it out. But let's get to the news today and this morning's bull run. The big news today, as you may already know, is that Bitcoin has come crashing back down to 112K again, and Bitcoin and crypto is dead. It's not. It's actually not. Let's give you the reasons for this right now, actually. So the cause of this most recent drawback that we've seen in the Bitcoin price, well, it's due to overleveraged traders who are being escorted out of the old crypto casino. Exchanges liquidated more than $1 billion worth of long positions in an hour, proving once again that margin is just a faster way to donate your coins back to the market. Analysts point to cascading liquidations and stop-loss hunting. Basically, one big margin call sets off a domino effect until everyone's portfolio looks like it just fell down a flight of stairs. Now, despite the chaos, Bitcoin is still holding that very crucial 110K line, which has acted as a support level since back in May. Even if we tumble toward 104K, analysts say the bigger bullish trend is still very much intact. And history, well, it backs it up. You see, September has been up 5.7% so far, and October is usually one of Bitcoin's strongest months on record. So yes, we've got blood on the floor, but statistically, the party, it ain't over. The crypto fear and greed index dropped to 45%, flipping sentiment from greedy optimism to nervous doubt. Or in plain English, everyone went from to the moon to please God, don't let it go any lower. Altcoins, well, they've also received a bit of a smackdown as of late. Ethereum's holding that $4,200 line. XRP tapped around $279, and Solana tanked from $253 to $223. And Cardano, well, it's been flirting with critical support itself. Some smaller names like Astra on Binance and Pump, hovering at $48, are consolidating, and analysts call them attractive opportunities. Or in other words, roll the dice carefully and don't complain when it inevitably all goes wrong. Now, the pro tip from experts is wait a day or two of this sideways action to conclude before touching anything right now. That's how you avoid being the next victim of stop-loss hunters out there. Meanwhile, institutions are happily feasting on the dip. Metaplanet grabbed another $600 million worth of Bitcoin, reminding everyone that when retail panic sells, whales treat it like a Costco Day sample. Currently, the market's in a large cap session with BNB, Solana, and Ethereum leading the charge. Analysts even predict an altcoin all-season might arrive soon. Just don't expect the fossils from past cycles to rise from the dead. But if you're zooming out, short-term traders got torched, but long-term holders are still up and holding solid. Bitcoin's dip looks more like leverage cleansing than a trend killer, and if history is any guide, the setup is bullish once all of the wreckage clears. So stay pat for now. Let's see how things play out over the next couple of days. Then it might be time to make some moves. In the meantime, crypto Twitter has been a rage with its newest obsession, a vague promise of a massive political news coming out about Bitcoin tomorrow. Ooh, interesting. Dennis Porter, CEO of the Satoshi Action Fund, lit the fire by saying the announcement will reshape the trajectory of Bitcoin politics, and he called it a defining moment. He then added hints about critical phone calls behind the scenes, cryptic enough to sound important, but vague enough to also be an audition for House of Cards. The hype machine took over instantly thereafter. Wendy O said this news could influence the entire history of crypto. Whoa. Fred Krueger, a Bitcoin maxi with a sharper tongue and weird name, suggested that Porter might just be engagement farming. Then enter stage left Paulo Ordoino, CEO of Tether, who skipped the mystery and simply called Bitcoin certainty. One word, maximum drama, exactly the kind of tweet designed to break the retweet button. Investors and policymakers are buzzing, especially since this cliffhanger lands right as Washington's Bitcoin debates are heating up. Between mining regulation battles, fresh lobbying campaigns, and broader fights over adoption, the timing here couldn't be much juicier. But what is it really, you ask? Well, no one knows yet. Could be legislation, could be a regulatory shift, could be a political endorsement, could also be nothing but a masterclass in social media hype. What we do know is that the suspense is working. Market chatter is absolutely off the charts and speculation is running wild. Bitcoin, meanwhile, is still trading around that 120K level while everyone stares at the calendar like it's Christmas Eve. So the question remains, will Tuesday deliver history-making policy, or is this another overhyped tease that leaves everyone with nothing but disappointment and a lower engagement rate? I guess only time will tell, so we'll tell you more when we find out more tomorrow. And in other news, Michael Saylor's company Strategy is back at it. And what does that mean? Of course, it means buying another 850 Bitcoin for about 100 million bucks. They paid an average price of 117K per coin, which is basically saying, yes, I'll have the filet mignon, and no, I don't care what it costs. That takes Strategy's total to a jaw-dropping 639,835 Bitcoin, scooped up for around $47 billion at an average price of nearly 74K per coin. Even after the market dip, that pile is still worth over $72 billion, which means Saylor is still massively in the green, while the rest of us are counting loose quarters under the couch cushions. And how did Strategy pay for this most recent round, you ask? Well, by selling shares, of course. They moved about $100 million worth of stock last week and shoved it straight into Bitcoin. Now, this is not a company that talks about diversification, okay? Their diversification strategy is BTC or bust. That's it. The pace, however, has slowed down a bit, though. In July, they grabbed over 31,000 Bitcoin. In August, it was 7,700. September so far, just 3,300. Saylor's explanation for this? When the big institutions show up, the roller coaster tends to get a little less exciting. Or in other words, Bitcoin might feel boring for a while, which is the kind of thing only a billionaire can say with a straight face. And then, of course, there's Metaplanet, Japan's answer to Saylor's obsession. They just bought 5,419 Bitcoin for 632 million bucks at an average price of around 117K each. That brings their total stash to over 25,555 Bitcoin, worth nearly 2.71 billion bucks. Now, they've already hit their original 2025 goal of 10,000 BTC back in June. Now, they're aiming for 210,000 Bitcoin by 2027. Subtle. Metaplanet even raised $1.4 billion by issuing nearly 400 million new shares. They set up a new U.S. arm in Miami and created Bitcoin Japan Inc. because apparently the brand just wasn't obvious enough. And yet, despite all this chest beating, their stock is down nearly 30% in the last month. Now, investors may not love the ride, but if you're stacking coins, these guys are setting Olympic records here. The big picture, though, Strategy and Metaplanet are vacuuming coins off the market like there's no tomorrow. And while stock traders keep freaking out, that kind of corporate hoarding is the exact kind of thing that pushes the Bitcoin floor price higher and higher over time. So those two are doing God's work over there, and we'll keep you posted if they end up buying more, which we know they will. And in other news, Strive is buying healthcare tech company Semler Scientific at a 210% premium, which is kind of Wall Street's way of saying, yes, we're overpaying, and no, we don't care. Friday's price was $29 a share. Strive is paying $90.52 per share. That's the financial equivalent of walking onto a used car lot and offering double sticker price before the salesman even opens his mouth. The real story, though, is the Bitcoin. I mean, along with the merger, Strive bought 5,800 Bitcoin for 675 million bucks at an average price of about 116K. That takes their total stash to over 10,900 BTC. Semler Scientific, by the way, wasn't some random company either. They were one of the earlier ones to make Bitcoin their main treasury asset and even helped their stock surge almost 40% back when they first announced it. Now, the two firms are merging into a new publicly traded Bitcoin hoarding machine, following the same playbook that we've seen from Strategy. Raise money, buy Bitcoin, pump your Bitcoin per share number, and hope investors love it more than their last index fund. The context here is that over 50 companies now hold Bitcoin on their balance sheet. And that's more than 1 million coins in total worth over $112 billion. So this whole Bitcoin treasury strategy thing isn't exactly fringe anymore. It's really becoming more of a corporate habit. And the bottom line is, if you wanted a safer way to get exposure to Bitcoin without touching an exchange, these kinds of mergers are basically gift wrapped for you. Skeptics, however, will point out that paying 3 times market price for a company just to have an excuse to buy Bitcoin could backfire. But if Bitcoin keeps climbing, no one's going to remember the sticker shock. And anyway, so who cares, right? A lot of things going on here, including AgriForce. This is an interesting one. A tiny agriculture tech company that pivoted into Bitcoin mining has now decided it's an Avalanche token treasure chest. Okay. So the market cap for this company on Friday was about $3.2 million, okay? Their ambitions: raise $550 million to buy Avalanche tokens, because why not, right? Their rebranding is AVAX One, with Anthony Scaramucci leading their advisory board. Yes, the mooch. He's helping raise money and market the company, while Hivemind Capital is putting in meaningful capital too. The plan here is to own more than $700 million in Avalanche, tokenize traditional assets on the Avalanche blockchain, and eventually buy fintech and insurance companies and drag them onto Avalanche, whether they like it or not. Skybridge's Scaramucci's fund has already tokenized $300 million of its hedge funds on Avalanche, so this isn't entirely out of the blue. Why Avalanche, though, you ask? Well, it's a high-speed blockchain used by some Wall Street firms, and Scaramucci says he believes all assets will eventually be tokenized. Timing, well, isn't exactly random here either. With the new Genius Act establishing rules for stablecoins and the president openly embracing crypto, the regulatory climate is suddenly sunny for experiments just like this. Still, investors have cooled on these crypto treasury companies. About a quarter are now trading below the value of the tokens they actually hold, and plenty have seen share prices tank once the hype cycle ends up finishing up. But if AVAX One actually raises all that money, that's serious new demand for Avalanche. And indirectly, anything that drags more institutions on-chain usually ends up benefiting Bitcoin too. Because when the side projects wobble, Bitcoin is always the reserve asset that they run back to. So whenever you get Avalanche guys are ready, we'll happily welcome you back into the fold. And Arthur Hayes, he believes that the macro domino that sends Bitcoin to $1 million has finally tipped. In a post on X, the BitMEX co-founder argued that the U.S. Federal Reserve is preparing markets for something called yield curve control, under what he called a third mandate. Hayes pointed directly to the Senate confirmation of economist Stephen Moran to the Fed's Board of Governors, and a fresh Bloomberg report raising the same possibility as proof this isn't just internet cope. With Fed Board member Moran now confirmed, the MSN is preparing for the world for the Fed's first mandate, or for the Fed's third mandate, which is essentially yield curve control, LFG. Hayes wrote, yeah, he really said LFG, and no, he hasn't been hacked that I'm aware of or anything. Now, the third mandate isn't a meme. It's statutory here, okay? Congress literally instructs the Fed under 12 U.S.C. and 225A to promote maximum employment, stable prices, and here's the kicker, moderate long-term interest rates. That third line item is where Hayes says the real fun begins. Because if the Fed decides to moderate, that means control the entire bond market, then yield curve control goes from finance blog fantasy to actual policy. Now, unlike quantitative easing, where the Fed buys a set amount of bonds and hopes yields cooperate, the YCC sets specific targets on medium and long-dated treasuries, and then enforces them with unlimited buying power if necessary. The St. Louis Fed describes it as imposing interest rate caps on particular maturities, or in other words, rate caps with an infinite credit card. Japan's been running this circus since back in 2016. Australia gave it a quick whirl, and Hayes says if the Fed does it, Bitcoin goes totally vertical. Because if long-term yields are artificially capped while deficits stay wide open, real returns get crushed. Dollar loses value, fiat gets debased, and capital flees into the hardest cap asset on the planet, which of course is Bitcoin. So get your rocket boosters ready, boys and girls. Arthur Hayes said so, not me. And Mr. Wonderful, he's back in the news as he has simplified his own portfolio and apparently his entire worldview. Kevin O'Leary announced he's ditching every crypto asset that isn't Bitcoin or Ethereum. Meme coins, altcoins, all of them, they're gone from his portfolio. His reasoning, well, if you hold Bitcoin and Ethereum, you're already exposed to over 90% of the alpha and volatility of the entire crypto market. Or in plain English, why own a circus when you can just buy the two elephants? O'Leary argues that Bitcoin is treated as a store of value, while Ethereum is positioned to capture Wall Street's move on-chain thanks to stablecoins and regulation. He predicts Ethereum will see the bulk of demand from traditional finance. Meanwhile, he says that stablecoins themselves are becoming a massive niche, and Ethereum is positioned as the main beneficiary. Basically, he's echoing ETH talking points straight from Tom Lee's playbook. But don't worry, Bitcoin still gets the crown. O'Leary says it's here to stay and recently predicted it could surge to 250K. More than 10% of his personal net worth is already in Bitcoin and related assets. Ms. O'Leary even admitted the obvious, saying crypto ownership is mostly about price volatility. Sometimes up, sometimes down. Sometimes you're rich, sometimes you're wrecked. But in O'Leary's new worldview, you only need two coins, Bitcoin and ETH. Everything else is just noise. So the guy who once promoted every niche project under the sun is now saying, forget the clutter, stick to the majors. For Bitcoin, it's validation. Even the loudest talking heads on TV are admitting it's the only real store of value game in town. For Ethereum, it's a free commercial, right? And for the rest of the crypto zoo, Kevin O'Leary says, thanks for playing. I'm sticking to Bitcoin and ETH. All right, we're taking a break, but when we're back, more Blockchain Report coming your way right after this.
In a world far away. Nah, just kidding. This story begins in this world. It all started in 1460 in Antwerp, when the first commodities exchange was created, but the real transformation came in 1602, when the Amsterdam Stock Exchange was founded. Considered the oldest in the world, it was the first to trade financial assets. Over the years, Britain expanded its colonial and maritime influence, and the British pound sterling overtook the Dutch guilder in the market. Thus, the London Stock Exchange became the financial centre of the world. The 20th century came, and the world got into some trouble. But shortly after World War II, the Bretton Woods Agreement established the dollar as the world's primary reserve currency, and the centre of the planet moved to Wall Street. Today, we're travelling at the speed of light towards a new age, an era shaped by the consolidation of Bitcoin as the currency that will define the future of the markets. We present Roxom, a new Bitcoin-denominated market that allows trading all sorts of securities, commodities, derivatives, options, and anything you can imagine. Roxom, rock-solid markets.
All right, welcome back. It's time for a little AIAIO. Let's see what our robot overlords are up to now. First up, Albania has officially promoted its AI-powered virtual assistant Dila to the role of government minister. Okay, yeah, you heard that right. The country now has a cabinet member who doesn't exist, can't show up late to meetings, and won't take bribes, at least not yet. Prime Minister Edi Rama announced the move at a Socialist Party assembly, saying Dila's mission is to keep Albania 100% corruption-free, which is a bold promise for a bot in a country where corruption is practically a national pastime. You see, Dila, which means son in Albanian, used to handle boring bureaucratic chores like helping citizens get driver's license, pensions, and court filings through the e-Albania platform. It's issued more than 36,000 digital documents and provided nearly 1,000 services. Now, it's in charge of overseeing all government procurement, an area that has been a swamp of scandals for the past decades. Albania's track record, well, let's review, shall we? The mayor of Tirana and former president were charged with corruption this year. The former environmental minister got over 6 years in prison for a 3.7 million euro bribe. And corruption has been one of the main reasons Albania's EU membership bid has been stuck since back in 2014. So yeah, let's put a chatbot in charge. What could possibly go wrong there? Of course, Rama didn't mention pesky details like who's accountable if Dila screws up, or what human oversight exists, or how to stop the bot from being manipulated. This isn't Albania's first AI rodeo, though. Ukraine unveiled Victoria Shi, an AI foreign affairs spokesperson, last year. Funny thing, though, is Albania was once ahead of the curve on crypto with a comprehensive framework as early as back in 2020. But while Dila gets promoted to minister, the Bank of Albania still issues warnings about trading Bitcoin. So, to recap, Albania trusts AI with its cabinet, but still doesn't trust its citizens with crypto. Sounds about right. Hate to say it. All right. In other news, artificial intelligence might be eating jobs left and right, but according to new research, there's still one thing humans do way better, and that is persuading you to buy useless crap online. The University of British Columbia's Sauder School of Business ran the numbers on live stream sales. You know, those sessions where someone hawks products in real time on e-commerce platforms. They compared 3 groups: human streamers, AI-powered avatars called digital streamers, and, wait for it, no streamer at all. The results? Humans crushed it. AI streamers barely outperformed the no one is selling you this option, which means in their current form, these digital sales bots are basically glorified mannequins with a chat box. People assume that if businesses are using digital streamers, they must be doing well, said study co-author Yawen Wang, but they aren't. The study looked at sales of 328 products on tmail.com. 74 pitched by humans, 72 by AI avatars, and 182 with no streamer at all. Every time humans were involved, sales spiked. Why? Well, it turns out that consumers like actual interaction. When researchers tested avatars that looked and sounded more human, results improved. And the game changer was real-time Q&A. If the avatar could answer live questions like a person, sales jumped 25% and revenue spiked 86%. Throw in a lottery during the live stream and sales rose another 17%, pushing revenue 70% higher. So the bottom line here is until AI can banter with the crowd and toss out freebies like a human carnival barker, it's going to keep losing to flesh and blood versions of salespeople. Hey, I like that guy. What's up, Rizbot? Now, the study's full conclusion is that, well, the best online sales strategy is probably a hybrid of human and AI, which is academic speak for let the robot handle the boring stuff, but let an actual human convince you to impulse buy another blender. And Goodwill's CEO, Steve Preston, says Gen Z isn't about to have a youth unemployment crisis because of AI. In fact, they're already in one. Over 2 million people used Goodwill's job services last year, and Preston says the line is only going to get longer as automation eats jobs like free samples at a farmer's market. While Silicon Valley insists their bots won't kill jobs, Preston says call centers and sales gigs are already being gutted. Or in other words, the voice telling you your call is important to us will now be an algorithm that doesn't need a lunch break. He's not calling it catastrophic yet, but he does say low-wage and entry-level roles are in the firing line, which is great because those jobs are usually where people actually learn how to work in the first place. Lose those, and suddenly you don't just have jobless 20-year-olds, you have an entire workforce with no pipeline to senior roles. Preston says it's already brutal for young people without degrees. The supposed skill-based hiring revolution you've read about? Well, he's seeing the opposite. People without college degrees have no jobs, especially the young men out there. He calls it a terrible thing, which is the polite CEO way of saying, Gen Z, you're totally screwed. And eventually, even college grads won't be safe because AI isn't just eyeing those entry-level desk jobs, it's eyeing the managers too. So what should Gen Z do exactly? Well, Preston says digital skills are critical, and no, being good at TikTok doesn't count. Knowing Excel, though, does. Shocking, I know. He says once people actually master basic tools like Google Docs and Excel, doors swing wide open. Add in some AI chops, think ChatGPT or Gemini, and suddenly you're leapfrogging everyone else in the job hunt. But if you're not into that corporate life, Learn clean tech. We're talking solar panels, EV charging stations. The robots haven't taken those yet. And Preston has a warning for millennials too. If you're in your 30s or 40s and still pretending Excel is advanced math, congratulations, you've locked yourself out of half the job market. The good news though, it's not hopeless. Preston points to people who went from homeless to working at Accenture and Google after digital boot camps. So yeah, you can still turn things around, assuming you're willing to learn actual skills instead of just scrolling threads all day. His bottom line here, though, is AI isn't coming for your job. AI already updated your LinkedIn to open for work, so good luck with all that. All right, we're taking a quick break, but when we're back, more blockchain report coming up, including our next series, Socially Awkward, because it looks like someone just bought TikTok, but it might not be who you expected. We'll be talking about that and more when we get back right after this.
Security matters. Zappo Bank, the only way to bank your Bitcoin. Apply now at zappobank.com.
So, tell us about your furry friend here. What's his name?
Oh, this? This is Bitcoin.
Bitcoin.
It's not just a cat, he's family.
Quite a name, and I must say, looks quite pampered.
Oh, absolutely. Bitcoin deserves nothing but the best. He's my little prince.
But with such a valuable pet, aren't you afraid of losing him?
Losing Bitcoin? No, it never happened before, so it's not something I worry about. Excuse me for a moment. Bitcoin, stay here, right?
Bitcoin, no! Bitcoin, come on, little buddy, Bitcoin, I need you. Don't go.
All right, it's time for a little socially awkward. Let's see what the algorithms are doing. Well, right now, as we know, the big news of the day is that Bitcoin's currently sitting around that 112K price mark. But the bigger circus right now is over who is getting custody of TikTok. President Trump, in an interview with Fox News, suggested that none other than Rupert and Lachlan Murdoch could soon be part of the new ownership group. Yeah, of TikTok. The Chinese-owned app Congress tried to ban may end up in the hands of the same family that gave you Fox News and The Simpsons. Talk about range. Trump listed off the supposed dream team of American buyers: Oracle's Larry Ellison, venture capital heavyweight Andreessen Horowitz, Michael Dell through Silver Lake, and now, apparently, Lachlan and Rupert Murdoch. They're very well-known people, Trump said, before dropping Lachlan's name like he was introducing a contestant on The Bachelor. He added that Rupert would probably be in the group too, calling them American patriots who would do a really good job. Everyone says so. A TikTok deal would be massive. Now, that would put the app that's been the biggest headache for Silicon Valley giants into the hands of American billionaires who already run media empires. Ellison, of course, just helped bankroll his son David's takeover of Paramount Global. The Murdochs, well, they're looking for redemption after their $580 million MySpace purchase in 2005 turned into a $35 million garage sale when Facebook ate their lunch for them. But TikTok isn't MySpace. It's worth billions. It's still growing like crazy, and Zuckerberg would sell his metaverse goggles for a fraction of that sweet, sweet user base. So why does this matter for Bitcoin? Well, because once again, control of the internet is up for sale to the highest bidder. Tech giants, VCs, private equity, and political power brokers are fighting over who gets to own the attention of a generation. And while they scrap over algorithms and ad revenue, Bitcoin sits outside the food fight as the only asset that can't be bought, banned, or bailed out by Rupert Murdoch. Now, if TikTok ends up run by the same people who once thought MySpace was the future, maybe the smartest move isn't dancing for views, it's stacking sats while billionaires play Monopoly with your data. Fun. All right, gang, it's time to wrap up today's show with a little bullish, bearish, or BS. Let's run the stinger and get to it. All right, gang, this is the part of the show where we recap today's top stories and determine if they are looking good, bad, or if it's just a bunch of BS for our beloved Bitcoin. Let's get to it. First up, if you were not paying attention the last 2 hours, Bitcoin plunged from 115 to 112K in a matter of minutes as cascading liquidations wiped out over $1 billion in leveraged long positions. Analysts say that support at 110K is still very much intact, with September holding up historically strong as we enter the end of the month. I am calling bearish on this one, okay? Short term, this flush certainly hurts action for selling is always ugly, but long term, leveraged wipeouts often reset the board for healthier upside. So for now, traders are nervous, so expect some chop before any meaningful rally back in the other direction. That's the good direction, so stay tuned. But right now, I'm calling a little bit bearish on this one. So not the best start, but that's okay. One bearish to start. Let's move on to story number 2. We got Dennis Porter says a defining Bitcoin policy moment is coming tomorrow, with speculation ranging from legislation to endorsements, or maybe it's just pure hype. I don't know. Tether's Paulo Ardoino cut through the noise by calling Bitcoin certainty. Ooh, I'm feeling bullish on this one, because if this turns into real policy support here, gang, Bitcoin's price could see a jolt of fresh optimism that we have been waiting for. Even if it's hype, the attention alone pulls Bitcoin deeper into political and mainstream conversations, fueling long-term price and adoption. So my short take is hype today, policy tomorrow, but either way, I'm feeling bullish on it. Any kind of publicity is good publicity, especially when it comes to Bitcoin. So I'm feeling good. Hopefully we get some good news tomorrow. We'll see though. So we got one bearish, one bullish, one to go. Let's do it. Last but not least, Albania put its virtual assistant Dila in charge of government procurement, promising to stamp out corruption with software while still warning citizens to not trust crypto. Great. I am calling BS on this one, okay? This has nothing to do with Bitcoin's fundamentals, and it has everything to do with a country outsourcing corruption management to Clippy 2.0. You guys remember Clippy? I remember him. Is this entertaining? Sure. Are there any real implications for price impact? Not so much. So the short take is this is a funny headline, but there's no real effect on Bitcoin here, so I'm calling BS on this. So today's final tally, let's do it. We got one bearish, one bullish, one BS, which means today's diagnosis, I'm calling BS on this Monday, okay? The market got a bearish gut punch with liquidation, but the political hype waiting for tomorrow's announcement keeps sentiment leaning bullish underneath the surface here, so I'm not freaking out just yet. Add in Albania's AI minister circus, which has absolutely no impact on Bitcoin whatsoever, and you've got a day that's basically balanced between nerves, hope, and just absolute nonsense. So the net effect here, neutral for now, but with bullish potential once the wreckage eventually clears. So for now it's BS, but I'm bullish on the long term of things, all right? Well, gang, that is a wrap for today's episode of the Blockchain Report. Remember, it's Monday. On Mondays only, that is today, we are 10 a.m. to 12 p.m. Pacific time. But for the rest of the week, that's Tuesday through Friday, we are back to our normal time of 8 a.m. Pacific time to 10 a.m. Pacific time. So we're here for you in the mornings with all of the best and brightest signal you can find in the cryptoverse right here on the Blockchain Report. Now, if you haven't already, gang, make sure you like, follow, and subscribe to RoxomTV and yours truly at Hank at RoxomTV on whichever platform you choose to do your doom scrolling on. And as always, thank you for tuning in with us today. We'll be back tomorrow. Same place, different time. Again, 8 a.m. Pacific time, right here on the Blockchain Report. Thanks for tuning in, and until then, stay safe, stay informed, and as always, hodl on. See you tomorrow.
Security matters. Zappo Bank, the only way to bank your Bitcoin. Apply now at zappobank.com.
So, tell us about your furry friend here. What's his name?
Oh, this? This is Bitcoin.
Bitcoin.
It's not just a cat, he's family.
Quite a name, and I must say, looks quite pampered.
Oh, absolutely. Bitcoin deserves nothing but the best. He's my little prince.
But with such a valuable pet, aren't you afraid of losing him?
Losing Bitcoin? No, it never happened before, so it's not something I worry about.